Hi everyone, what's up? Welcome back to my tutorial channel. Daniel's here and today I'm back to talk about elementary statistics. And the topic today I would like to cover is graphical summaries. Remember on the first topics I introduced two variables, qualitative and quantitative. So today we are going to focus on only qualitative data. For qualitative data, sometimes when you look at the table of data sets, it's really hard to capture some important information like what type category is the most commonly used, what type categories appear the most in the data set. So we need some other summaries and some other graphs to illustrate the data sets. So in qualitative data, there are two types of summaries: the frequency distribution, the bar graphs and bar charts. So first, frequency distribution. Here's an example. Table 1 presents a list combined by a retailer. The retailer accepts 4 types: credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. So when you look at this data sets, it's really hard to know what type cards is the best seller, what type cards is the least commonly used. So we are going to use frequency as a tool to compare between these four categories. So frequency is basically the number of times this category appears on the data sets. For example, Discover, we have 1 Discover, 2 Discover, 3 Discover, 4 Discover, 6 Discover, and 7. So Discover occurs 7 times on the dataset. So frequency, the frequency of a category is the number of times it occurs in the datasets. The frequency distribution is a table that presents the frequency for its categories. Here, this is a frequency distribution table. There are two columns. The first column represents the type credit cards, the name of categories, and the second column is the frequency of its category. So because MasterCard appear on the dataset 11 times, so the frequency of MasterCards is 11. Visa occurs 23 times on the dataset, so the frequency of Visa is 23. And similar for American Express and Discover. And the total frequency is 50 because the dataset contains 50 customer credit cards. However, sometimes by using frequency distribution is still not enough to know the percentage of each of these categories. So we're going to construct another table that is quite similar to this frequency table, but a little bit different. So construct relative frequency distribution. The relative frequency of a category is the frequency of the category divided by the sum of all frequency. And a relative frequency distribution is a table that presents the relative frequency of its category. Often the frequency is presented as well. So this is a relative frequency table. The first column is the name of categories, the types credit cards. The second column is the frequency, and the relative frequency is the last column. 0.22 is 11 divided by 50. So for each category, we take its frequency divided by the total, the sum of all frequencies. So 0.46 is 23 divided by 50. 0.18 is 9 divided by 50. 0.14 is 7 divided by 50. And the total of relative frequency is 1. So this frequency, relative frequency table tells us the percentage of each categories on the dataset. The difference between frequency and relative frequency is the frequency of category is the number of items in the categories, the number of times its category appear on the datasets. The relative frequency is the proportion of its items in the categories, the number of times, the proportion of number of times its category appear on the dataset. So that was about frequency distribution and relative frequency distribution. Now we are going to use another tool to illustrate the data sets. That's the bar graphs. So a bar graph is basically a graphical representation of a frequency distribution. A bar graph consists of rectangles of equal width with one rectangle for its category. And the heights of rectangles represent the frequencies or relative frequencies of the categories. So let's look at this example. We're going back to the example of credit cards. This is relative frequency distribution of the type credit card. So to construct a bar graphs, first of all, we are going to construct a horizontal axis. Place the category names along the axis evenly spaced. Step 2, construct a vertical axis to represent the frequency or relative frequency. Step 3, construct a bar for this category with the heights of the bars equal to the frequency or relative frequency of their categories. The bars should not touch and should all be of the same width. So this is these two are the bar graph of frequency and relative frequency. So the first step, we construct the horizontal line, the horizontal axis. Place the four categories, MasterCard, Visa, American Express, and Discover, evenly spaced on the horizontal line. And then step 2, we construct the vertical axis. If we are constructing the bar graphs for frequency, we use the vertical axis to represent the frequency. If we are constructing the bar graphs or the bar graphs for relative frequency distribution, the vertical line represents the relative frequency. And then we look at the relative frequency table to construct the heights of the bar. So each bar, the height of the bar is the frequency or the relative frequency of its category. And you see here the bars are not touching each other, and the space between them should be the same. Like the space between MasterCards and Visa is the same as the space between Visa and American Express, and the same as the space between American Express and Discover. So that's how we construct the bar graphs. And sometimes people are not only interested in constructing the bar graphs, but they also want to see the most commonly used credit cards among these four. So we have another type bar graphs that show the orders of frequency, that is the Barreto. So the Barreto chart is basically a bar graph in which the categories are presented in order of frequency or relative frequency, with a larger frequency or relative frequency on the left and the smallest one on the right. So here you see Visa is the best seller because the frequency of Visa is 23, so it's 0.46 and the relative frequency. So the Barreto chart is basically just the bar chart, but the larger frequency will be listed on the left, and the smaller frequency will be listed on the right. Barreto chart is very useful when it is important to see clearly which are the most frequently occurring categories. Another type of bar graph is horizontal bar charts. So the bar in the bar graph can be either horizontal or vertical. Horizontal bar is sometimes more convenient when the categories have long names. For example, look at this dataset of type employment. The name of the type employment is very long: farming, forestry, and fishing. You see that? So if we use regular vertical bar charts, it would be a mess to list all of these type employment under the horizontal line. So in this case, we tried to flip the bar charts. So horizontal bar chart is just for the case when the name of the categories are too long. And the last bar chart is side-by-side bar charts. Sometimes we not only interested in only one information of its category, but we might have two or more. So sometimes we want to compare two bar graphs that have the same categories. So here's an example. This is a frequency table of some website: Google, Facebook, Yahoo, YouTube, and Wikipedia. But this table gives us not only one information for its category. We have two information for its category: the information in 2011 and 2012. So there are two possible comparison here. We not only compare between the categories, but also compare between um, the year 2011 2012. So in this case, we need side-by-side bar charts, and the information of the same category will be the bars that placed next to each other. So for example, Google, 157 is the blue bar, and 173 is the yellow bar. So by this way, we are able to compare not only between categories, but also between December 2011 and 2012 of its categories. So that was about bar charts. Now we are going to talk about the last charts of qualitative data. So sometimes we not only want to compare the frequency, but the relative frequency. Sometimes we can use bar chart to illustrate. So a bar chart is an alternative to the bar graph for displaying relative frequency information. A bar chart is a circle. The circle is divided into sections, one for its category. The relative size of the sections match the relative frequencies of the categories. For example, if a category has a relative frequency of 0.25, then its section takes up to 25% of the circle. So it is customary to label its sector with its relative frequency expressed as percentage. So for example, if we want to control a bar chart for the credit card data, next to the column of relative frequency, we add another column. We insert another column. That is the side section. So here we have the angle corresponding to the relative frequency. So for example, this relative frequency is 0.22. That means MasterCard takes up to 23% of the datasets. So 22% times 360 degrees is 79 degrees. And the blue color, the blue piece of bar chart is MasterCard. So bar chart is convenient when the dataset is presented in a percentage. So that is everything for today. Thank you so much for watching. And next video, I'm gonna talk about graphical summaries for quantitative data. Bye, and see you later.